They say that good revolutionaries talk loud, but the best revolutionaries deliver results. And I'm surprised that neither of the gentlemen has spoken about what's been happening in the Basque region. And the Basque region, which was once the most depressed, oppressed, backward region, is now the contrarian economic performer in Spain. How come we don't hear any voice from them, and particularly from the Mondragon cooperative movement, that has actually been more resilient than any other economic agent in Europe?
During the crisis, the economic crisis has hit the cooperative movement as well as everybody else. But there's a couple of points to make about it. The first thing is that in the Basque Country, unemployment is at its lowest. It's still over 10%. It's the lowest of anywhere else in the whole of Spain, and it's up to 30% in the south. And one of the reasons for that is because the structure of the industrial structure is been dominated by cooperatives. So that what happened when the recession hit, workers voted, and this applied in the various parts of the Mondragon cooperative too. They voted to take a wage cut so that everybody else could, all their fellow workers could hold on. But in the industry which had produced the Spanish miracle in the 2000s, which is the building industry, which produced all the, we now have 3 million empty housing units in Spain, and which gave rise to the mortgage victims platform. That just collapsed. But in the Basque Country, which is industrial and still has a high level advanced industrial technology run through cooperatives, especially if it's the case with Mondragon, you've got a much lower level of increase in unemployment. That said, however, the crisis has been so strong that it has actually hit heartland parts of the cooperative movement. There's just nothing they can do about it. The best example of that is Fagor, which is the domestic appliances wing of Mondragon, which had to go through a complete restructuring. They were stuck in the wrong part of the market. They were neither high-level German-style, super efficient appliances, nor were they really cheap. They were sort of in the middle. But even there, what happened was that no workers lost their job. They had to go get jobs in other parts of the Mondragon cooperative. Why do we not hear about this? Because it's an example they don't want us to hear about. With all the difficulties and all the criticism, there is quite a bit of criticism about Mondragon becoming too much of like another multinational, but with a cooperative structure. But with all that taken account of, that is an example that really they do not want people to know about, because it shows you that working people can run production. And working people can confront a recession in a way that is much, much less painful than if the recession's been confronted by normal capitalist bosses. So that's what I would say in relation to that.
Dick, towards the end of your talk, you spoke about the possibility, ways that Spanish politics could be shaken up in the next period, and you referred to two things, rise of a struggle and also the referendum election in Catalonia. I also wonder, as perhaps another factor, if somewhat secondary, the impact of what's occurring in Greece could have on the Spanish elections. So in that regards, my question is, how are people in Spain viewing what's happening in Greece? I'm not asking you for detail about the actual negotiation, just how ordinary people in Spain are viewing that. And very specifically, what is Citizens and Podemos' position on this? I mean, obviously we know Podemos is anti-austerity. Is Citizens also anti-austerity? And what is Podemos doing in terms of perhaps solidarity with the Greek government and people in the current negotiations?
Well, in relation to that, I'd have to say that everybody here, especially Podemos itself, are so stressed and so driven by the political situation in Spain and this brutal political contest, which is basically is everybody ganging up on Podemos. That's basically what the shape of the political contest is. Everybody ganging up on Podemos, which is everybody ganging up on the political expression of the Ligado movement and of working class and popular resistance to austerity. That's what it's about. They're so engaged in that, and they're so involved in the struggle, and particularly we have these elections where they're absolutely determined that Podemos will not get a foothold in any, or the left more broadly, as in this Barcelona together ticket here. It's so determined that they will not get a foothold that, their hands are full fighting this battle. Now that said, the ordinary people here are highly sympathetic, extraordinarily sympathetic to Greece. And whenever there's a demonstration, you get a good turnout. But it's not as the best thing that can happen for Syriza here in Spain is if there is an advance of Podemos and the broader left forces. And so, it's like there's many demonstrations, or any demonstrations at the moment, of solidarity with Greece. In fact, some people are suggesting it's about time we did something, given what they've been asked to swallow. But the main thing is if you get a victory of the left in Barcelona, that's worth a lot more than 3 demonstrations in support of Syriza, no matter how necessary that is, because what it does is it establishes a foothold for a different sort of politics, anti-austerity politics, popular politics, in a very important city in Europe. So that's where the battle is centred at the moment. I don't think I can say any more than that on that. But of course, yes, Syriza, the link Syriza Podemos, Syriza United Left is very strong.
Vivian.
Yes. Hi, Dick. This whole discussion really confronts us with the whole issue of, political organisation and what kind of political organisation can succeed in moving towards a socialist society. And it seems that there's this huge dilemma with these sclerotic, ossified, old, bureaucratised type of parties on the one hand, and this raw energy on the streets on the other. I mean, the raw energy movement seems so fragile when confronting the capitalist state with all its various powers. And I wondered if either of your speakers tonight would like to reflect on that dilemma briefly.
I think it's a really interesting question, because I think at the heart of my own presentation was the question of organisation. What is the type of organisation that ordinary people feel at home in, that will inspire, that will give them a platform, that will give them a sense of involvement and inclusiveness? And clearly the answer, I think, well, not clearly, but the answer to me looks not like traditional political parties, but not like deliberative assemblies either. And I think that was the interesting point in Spain, is that ordinary activists who were drawn into the battle by taking part in occupations and so on themselves told us that they couldn't see how change could be effected simply by occupying things and by sitting in squares and towns. It was an important moment, it was an important gesture, but there was an inevitable organisational question that was posed from it. But what we've seen in Spain, and to a very interesting extent across the rest of Europe as well, a lot of very hard thinking about the party form. And I know there's people in the room here who are very interested in this question. How do you construct an organisation which can achieve some results in elections, which can project a positive message to people who are maybe too busy to be out on the streets occupying and so on? You've actually, you have within your grasp the possibility of political change via elections. And I hope, Dick, what will give us a little bit more colour about, we're coming into the local elections here at the end of May. That Barcelona election is going to be contested by Ada Colau. Ada Colau told me in 2013 she never would have an intention of standing for power. But lots of people said to her, Ada, but we can't change things just through direct action, just through deliberative assemblies, just through sitting in streets. We need mobilising forces, we need some sort of organisation. And she said, fine, but it needs to be open enrolment. I will stand for the Barcelona mayoral election at the end of this month. And in a sense, it's kind of grasping this very interesting space. It's no longer, in Spain, horizontals versus verticals. The verticals have become horizontal, and the horizontals have become vertical. Yeah. It's finding a mode of traction between those two dimensions, which is so vital and so interesting. Elections are important. Why? Because through the elections, people can change the constitution. They can make the representative system more representative. So at the moment, one of the things that Spanish activists will tell you is they're looking for a second transition. The first transition brought in a very restraining electoral system. You had to get over 10% in the national elections to get a seat in Parliament. That needs to be lowered. We need to hear more different types of voices. We need to attack workers' pay. There are all sorts of things that can be achieved through elections. You can't achieve everything through elections, but you can achieve some things through elections. That was an important realisation. Political parties, 410, different forms, different shapes, some come, some go. An evanescent ecology, people trying out new tools. That is the space that we're in Europe at the moment. Absolutely fascinating. But the political party is part of any future story of change and organisation, no doubt about it.
Simon's mentioned the Barcelona Together. In fact, Article is the candidate for mayor of Barcelona. This whole experience that we've been describing of the indignados, of the mass occupation of the squares, all these dynamics have led to a lot of rethinking in the old left as well, and a lot of discussion about what is really the right forms of structure that will actually advance the struggle. And we'll square so many circles that have got to be squared. You've got to square the circle of participation with the circle of efficiency. You know, actually having an operation that works and that people will be confident about. The big struggle that Podemos has got at the moment here is that it's got to prove, it's got to convince a lot of wavering people that it could form a government, that it could be trusted to actually form a government. And this can't just be answered by saying we've got this wonderful program. They had a wonderful program in the European election, which was a sort of wish list program. And Syriza had to do the same thing. Syriza went through the same thing. They had to go to this election, and they could only win this last election with a very clear program which said, this is what we're going to do, this is how we're going to fund it, these are the people we're going to support, etc., etc., etc. This is our answer to the crimes of austerity. This is our answer to all the social misery. And that is basically what that whole discussion is in society broadly, in the left broadly, but also in Podemos, which is why you have ongoing debates in Podemos. You've got people leaving to Podemos, you've got people entering Podemos. There's not enough time for me to discuss that. But I think the Barcelona in Together ticket is very, very heartening. And it's very, very heartening because it's bringing together a lot of very, very different people from different backgrounds who wouldn't have been brought together in the past. And one of the reasons for that, of course, is Ada Colau herself, who has such political authority, such authority as a leader. One other thing I would say in this Barcelona election is to look out for is the score that the CUP, that is the Popular Unity candidacies, get. Because they are standing separately from Barcelona Together, and the reason for the difference is that they are for an immediate unilateral declaration of independence in Catalonia if there's a majority after September 27, and they are pushing much more, as well as the social question, the national question, at these local elections on May 24. That's it. Yeah. I'm sorry, I just don't think that you can, just to finish, you cannot square the circle of social participation, social struggle, social mobilisation, involvement of people, and the building of a proper organisation that is capable of taking this forward in the abstract. It's in relation to the actual concrete struggles and cultures that you've got, and that's what's happening here. And in other European countries that have been affected by austerity, Portugal is a very different place. The advance along that road, which is also the road to unity of all the different parts of the left, is much slower. That's it.
Kieran Howard.
Just a continuation of the last question about the attempt to resolve the traditional distinction between a vertical and horizontal organisation. So do you feel confident that Podemos can resolve that? Like, it's not enough to shame the political and financial elites. You need an organised political force to take power. So are you confident that Podemos, as a centralised party, can maintain the strength of that, combined with the self-activity of the rank and file, electoral activity with extra parliamentary struggle and the issues of maybe preserving a centralised unitary state and regional self-determination. Is it possible to resolve those potential contradictions, antagonisms? Are you hopeful this can be done? Like, basically, what's the day after the revolution? We want an October rather than just
Well, just asking the question like that shows you how difficult it is, doesn't it?
Yes.
I can't say yay or nay to that, because I think all those struggles lie ahead. A lot of those struggles lie ahead. There's already a big discussion in Podemos about its stand on the national question in Catalonia. Just to take one part of your question, which is that they are in favour, in abstract, of the right for self-determination. They say it's for the Catalan people to decide. They say we don't want the Catalan people to leave Spain, but of course we want to construct a different Spain, a Spain where everybody will want to stay. But they don't say clearly, though I've got to absolutely check this, I've got to pin them down on this. They don't say clearly that they will recognise these elections on September 27 as an effective substitute to a Scottish-style referendum, which has been denied the Catalan people. My feeling about that, it's just a personal feeling, is that if that's not the best substitute for a Scottish-style referendum, what is? We have to wait for change in Madrid, change at the centre. Podemos doesn't answer that question yet, clearly enough. And I think what we're beginning to see is in Podemos the sort of differentiation you get in all Spanish parties, which is they have a different message in different parts of Spain. So the Podemos people in Catalonia have a slightly different message to the Podemos people in Madrid, and that's because in Barcelona you cannot dodge the question of national self-determination of Catalonia, and given the massive mobilisations we've had here, and I should stress that these have been the biggest mobilisations in Europe, political mobilisations around the Catalan right to decide and sovereignty over the last 3 years, that it's just impossible not to take a position on that. And if they don't, they will lose support. And I think it's a bit noticeable that Podemos is doing relatively worse in Catalonia than it's doing in the rest of the Spanish state. On the rest of the issues, that will all be determined by the discussion, the debate. There's some important debates inside Podemos, also because you've got organised political currents in there, like anticapitalistas, who are the fourth internationalist current in the Spanish state. Important people in Podemos belong to anticapitalistas, like their leader in Andalusia, and one of the parliamentarians in the European Parliament. So, have no doubt, this debate will continue, and it will continue on very fruitful ground, which is the ground of struggle and of actually trying to build what needs to be built. That's it.
Well, a very good question and an even smarter answer. How can I possibly add to that? One of the things that I found most rewarding, talking at length with Spanish activists, and they have a fantastic propensity to talk for hours and hours, very saturated my brain became, was the concept of political tools. Tools, a very pragmatic kind of way of thinking about the political party, about mobilisation, about organisation. What they were looking for were things that work, actually. And if that meant the political party, and if that meant trying to create something out of that, that's where they would go. So the answer to this is kind of either or and both together. We are in a very interesting period of history in Europe and possibly elsewhere, where many of the old certainties no longer apply. You join the Labour Party and that party will look after you and bring forward the... No. You occupy the streets and then by those occupations that will lead to the revolution. No. The propensity of Spanish activists to sit and think hard and tough about both joining a party and occupying and direct action and deliberative thought and. The mood is being pissed off. The mood is being betrayed. The mood is being let down. The mood is grabbing at things that work at the moment, and also personalities who they think they can trust. At the moment, the jury, I think, is a little bit out. I like Dick's comments about this. The jury's a bit out on Pablo Iglesias. Is he a media star, or is he one of the comrades? Is he a bottom-up figure, or a top-down figure? Has he got his own political career in mind? Is there a Venezuelan influence there, or is he a person from Spain? Ada Colau, I think, is a better barometer of ordinary Spanish. She's kind of clearly out of a milieu of ordinary direct struggle, of material needs and so on. But she's now standing for election. Will that corrupt Ada Colau? Will she become a media star? Will that mean that she loses touch with the... I mean, we're in what I would call the Spanish laboratory. People are adding liquids to other liquids and seeing what colours and smokes and products are being created. And if it kind of works and disrupts and creates new possibilities, then we go with that concoction. And if it doesn't, then we'll put some other bloody thing in another test tube and see if that... The other thing to bear in mind here, not being a feature of our discourse so far, is the sheer complexity of sovereignty and power in the context in which our activist friends in Spain are operating. The European Union is a layer of a multi-scalar world in which Spain has to operate. Regions are a Dick's been very good on this. The different regions in play, the different town dynamics in play. Spain being part of the European Union, the IMF having a say in thing, the World Bank having a say in thing, transnational corporations having a say in thing. Volkswagen Group are watching the Barcelona elections incredibly closely. Why? Because if they don't like the look of what's going on in Barcelona, they're going to close their factories in that part of the world. Tens of thousands of people go and lose their jobs. That is the complexity of politics today. There aren't any readily assimilable, easy answers to these things. The thing that I most admire in Spanish activists, they don't back away from that, they don't try to simplify it, they see complexity, and they nevertheless grasp the opportunities to show solidarity with their fellow citizens. By hook or by crook, by this party, by that method, by this intervention. That's what comes across so impressively, is the sheer human value, dignity, respect, basic material needs, look after your neighbour, get them out of trouble when they're in trouble, and if that means coming up with a whole new set of formula, we'll do that.
They seem to prefigure in their organisation the type of society they want to create.
Of course, comrade.
Which is good. Rare.
You see, I think we're in a period of alliances. I mean, we've moved out of a period of the great sort of ideological confrontations where we've got a small number of very large parties who are very sure and confident of their constituency, their message, their ideology. I mean, one of the things I've been trying to describe there in the last answer is, in a sense, that alliance, affinity, coalition, currencies, congruence, these are the kind of terms that people describe themselves as operating under in Spain. So what are the examples? Well, Guinea and Barcelona, which is this confluential group that Ada Colau is going to be representing in the Barcelona elections, is nothing more than a temporary alliance. So we're in a politics which is much more evanescent, faster moving. Alliances come and go, coalitions are made. The story of the left is an incredible one for people who are interested in that story. There's chapter 5 of my upcoming book, 1699, in all good bookshops, describes a little bit of that. Sin, Izquierda, all the left parties. What's so interesting is the morphing, the shape-shifting, the changing of that left panorama. If you're interested in that, it is incredibly dynamic space. People coming, people joining new groups, people creating new groups, and then the regional. I mean, what we don't see, I mean, certainly if you come from the UK, there's kind of very strong sort of regional presences of particular kind of groups. Alliances and coalitions and affinities, that is the new normal. It's no longer a case of, you know, retreat to your own tribe, your own certainties and your own ideology and message. Actually, that is a formula for death in politics in Spain. You have to step forward, you have to speak to others, you have to loosen up your message, you have to loosen up your membership model. That's how they're progressing. So it's a very, very important part of the overall story of what's going on in Spain.
Syriza has been in talks with Russia and Putin as an alternative to the One World Government, New World Order, IMF, World Bank austerity package. I'm just wondering what's the latest on that, and also the US-Israeli-Australian coalition and willing alliance for the austerity One World Government, New World Order package. You got Russia and China and the BRICS alliance who are against it. How do you think that outcome will perspire?
Well, we're in the realm of geopolitics now, aren't we? So we're going from the micropolitics of Spain, street protests, political parties and so on, and we're describing what's happening at the top level. I mean, we had a chat at the bar. The suggestion was put that... Oh, Dick's back with us, good.
Hey, Dick.
We're talking geopolitics, Dick. Can you hear us? Can you hear us? Yeah, okay. So the question was posed as to whether we should welcome, I think is the idea, of an emergent coalition such as the BRICS, which might come to the aid of Syriza, it might come to the aid of Podemos. Is this the emergence of a different kind of oppositional politics on the global stage? I think that's the kind of the nub of it, right?
Yeah.
So my answer to that is no. I don't think it's any such thing. I think what we've got here is nonetheless a challenge to US hegemony globally. As part of answering one of my children's homework questions the other day, I was forced to look up the question, how many overseas bases does the US military have? Does anyone have the kind of faintest idea?
About 700?
It's over 1,000 US military bases outside the US. And that was my kid's 15-year-old kid's homework, and I actually nearly fell off the back of my chair. This is really what this question is about, is if you're in Russia and China and Brazil and so on, how are you going to exercise and exert global influence over a country which has such astonishing military capacity across the world? But nonetheless, should we welcome a challenge to the hegemony of the US and so on? I think they're all in cahoots together. I think that actually the message of this is really about keeping the wheels of industry turning, keeping global capitalism flows going. I don't actually see any threat to the capitalist system in this emerging BRICS story. I think the Syriza entry into this kind of geopolitical thing was really a gambit. It was a sign to Europe and to the European Union. If you won't help us, we know people who will. And that was a kind of, pact with the devil style of conversation. And I think probably helped to narrow the gap that we see between the European Union and Syriza at the moment. We've read today that Syriza has come up with $200 million, which is the immediate down payment for the last IMF loan and so on. I think they're not that far apart. I expect a deal between Syriza and the European Union, but they will play geopolitics in order to make their message heard. So maybe Dick's got another perspective.
Syriza, and if there's a Podemos government, would obviously welcome any differentiation in world capitalism that made them less vulnerable to attacks from Brussels and attacks from Washington. But that doesn't mean we advocate, the development of the BRICS, or we advocate capitalist development, stronger capitalism in South Africa or Brazil or anything like that. It's just what differences there are amongst the capitalist blocs have to be exploited. That's what the old Bolsheviks did. They made an alliance with the Germans against the British, etc., etc. But obviously, what we're for is for spreading of the struggle against neos everywhere, wherever it can take place. I mean, we seek to strengthen it, and we stand in solidarity with everybody who is engaged in it. So that's all I would have to say on that question.
I'm interested in the types of alliances emerging between established groups in Spain. So industry or even celebrities.
In Spain, because there's such a high level of social struggle and there's such historical memory of mass social struggle going back to the struggle against fascism, that it's a very political country. And all groups in society are political in one way or another. It's a bit hard to imagine in Australia. It certainly came as a shock to me when I came here. So that when you ever have an issue comes up, whether it's they want to reduce access to women's right to abortion, which was introduced by the Socialist Party government of Zapatero in 2004, the PP tried to reduce this, and immediately coalitions formed, massive coalitions, and there's demonstrations, and important people sign manifestos, and it all appears in the media and stuff like that. And in that particular case, it was powerful enough to force the PP onto the back foot. In fact, they claimed the minister, Ruiz Gallardón, who was introducing this, was actually defeated by the movement. So what I'm saying to you is that in relation to specific issues, that is just the way things work here. So you would see in relation to housing, evictions, all the social issues, people come out and say what they want, line up, and that applies to all parts of the political spectrum. And of course the artistic community, which has been the cultural community, which has been brutalised by a hike in the consumption tax. So going to films now is not 4% tax rate, it's now 21% tax rate.
Goes on in their democracy, and it shifts the balance of power towards the people. There's an equivalent organisation called Civio in Spain. They create, one of the tools that they've made is called Quemanda, which maps the power relationships between the powerful in Spain. And what my question is that, well, first of all, have you heard of this, Dick? And also, what role digital tools like this, beyond Twitter, playing in the political system in Spain, and how do you see the future of those tools playing out?
I haven't heard of that particular site, but it's hard to exaggerate the influence of internet counter-information that is politically powerful, that exposes, that puts into the hands of ordinary people information that they wouldn't normally get. And particularly exposes the operation of the power elites. I mean, one of the reasons that the PP is in such trouble is that there has been, through programs like Pablo Iglesias' own two programs on web-based television, but also through a whole vast network of websites and other internet-based operations. There's an enormous amount of information that goes out there, which gets around by the standard commercial media, which is very right-wing here generally, to manipulate people's consciousness and to leave them in the dark. So I think I think Simon stressed this, though I missed this part of his talk, that the whole operation of the internet as counterpower, source of counter-information, has been extraordinarily important and continues to be very important. Article Hour's campaign here, this is operating via internet. Meetings are being called by internet, and we get, while our local meeting here, we got 1,200 people in the barrio, it's the neighbourhood, just on the basis of no posters, nothing, just went out on Twitter, and then everybody turned up. And that just is a reflection of the level of politicisation and the functioning of the internet in that.
Well, it's a very, very good question. That set of slides that I put up there was part of a lecture which I was giving to students about the internet and politics. So Spain was merely a case study of a wider sort of set of issues that we could touch on for length about the impact of the internet on politics today. My dear colleague John Keane, well known to many people in this room, has given us a new definition of democracy called monitory democracy. He thinks so profound is the impact of the internet and the availability of information and the mobilising capacities that the sharing of information gives, that he says we've moved out of the era of representative democracy altogether, and we're now in something called monitory democracy, where in a sense the ordinary people in the street have this extraordinary capacity to shine a light increasingly on the affairs of on the affairs of governance, of politicians, political parties and so on, and this is creating what Dick I think calls the counter-democratic power. This is a really important set of phenomena. I think Spain takes us even one step further than that. What Spanish activists would say to me, it's not just a passive relationship in relation to those who govern us. So it's not just, the importance of digital tools is not just it allows us to assemble more information about what they're doing and to counteract that and to point out corruption, clientelism, nepotism and so on. It actually gives us an ability to mobilise much more easily, with much greater facility. Think back at the start of that thing that I showed you, 15M is in itself a monument to the power that connectedness and connected politics has. Can you imagine any other way in which you could get 6 to 8 million people in 60 cities and towns across Spain to mobilise if it wasn't for this extraordinary facility that quite simple digital technologies now has to mobilise people and to make them feel like participants in a political process rather than passive recipients of a process of governance? So we're in the middle of a revolution here. It's a revolution which is affecting everything. It's called, in the Australian Financial Review, digital disruption. You know, that's how elites describe it. Maya, online, David Jones, they're all having to adapt, bricks and mortar model, MOOCs coming into universities and so on. We will look back on this phase of our lives as the moment of an enormously disruptive but also creative process of reconstructing the possibility and the feasibility of new forms of mobilisation and participation. The Spanish laboratory, that's the phrase I urge you to think on as we go out into the night, that they are in the forefront of thinking about how these tools can be useful for us, not just watching, but participating. Not just participating, but taking over. Liquid democracy is one of the biggest phenomena in Europe at the moment is, why do we need these governors at all? Why do we need MPs, politicians? Why can't we have a virtual commons where we decide for ourselves what's important, how to respond, and so on? It's just becoming so easy. It is disruptive. It's disruptive of elite power, whether that be in Spain or Australia, Europe, you name it. We are on the cusp of something very, very big here. And the events in Spain are absolutely that tip of the arrow of change. That's why you're all here enjoying and being incredibly participatory in this discussion, because we can see it in front of our faces. Thank you.
Well, I think I've earned a comment at the end, and in fact, the comment is about something you kind of skited over. Sorry, I'll get closer so that Dick can hear me. So he didn't talk much about the Pirate Party.
Not enough.
And he didn't mention Iceland, where it's doing incredibly well. So our friend had something to do with WikiLeaks. Birgitta Jonsdottir is the leader of the Pirate Party, and now they are the most popular party in Iceland by 10%.
Wow.
And she is likely, the politician, is likely to be the next Prime Minister of Iceland. So these movements work. These alternatives work.
What's happening?
Go Iceland!
So, you know, these digital disruptions can enter into the mainstream. Iceland did not bail out their bankers.
Yeah.
Iceland prosecuted their bankers. Woo! And the people took over.
Yeah.
And when they say to her in the radio interviews, what are you thinking about, now that it looks like you're going to be the next Prime Minister? She says, oh no! Because ordinary people don't want to lead. This blank place is great, and in fact I think we've come to the point in time where we can share our ideas across the world, and we can have more horizontal structures. Liquid democracy is the future. It is a digital model, and we'll get there very quickly.
I think on that very positive note, we should end tonight. Of course, we should thank both our speakers for not just very interesting and informative talks, but really powerful and empowering talks. I certainly feel energised leaving here tonight, which is not what I thought I would feel after talking about Spain, austerity, mass unemployment. But in fact, the message has been one of the power of the people. So I hope you take that with us tonight. Thank you very much, and hope to see you here again.